There are mountains in the far north of Russia where the wind never really stops, and where, according to the old Mansi people, the ground itself is not to be trusted. On one of those slopes, 9 young travelers made camp on a winter night in 1959. Not one of them came home. The man leading them was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, a gifted engineering student and a seasoned mountaineer. He'd planned this trek for weeks. The pass would one day carry his name. The group set out from the town of Vize in late January. 10 skiers at first. One turned back with joint pain, a decision that likely saved his life. He would spend the rest of it wondering why. Their goal was a peak the Mansi called Holatsiacho. Translated, it means roughly dead mountain. How's that for an omen? On February 1st, they climbed the slope. For reasons still debated, they pitched their tent in the open, on exposed ground, instead of the sheltered forest just a mile away. That single choice may hold the whole mystery. They were expected to send a telegram by mid-February. It never came. When days passed with silence, search parties finally set out into the frozen Urals. On February 26th, they found the tent. And here the story turns strange. The tent was half collapsed, buried in snow, and slashed open. From the inside, everything was still inside. Boots, coats, food half eaten. Whatever happened, the 9 had fled into a night colder than 30 degrees below, most of them barefoot and half-dressed. Why would anyone do that? Their footprints told a chilling story. 9 sets of tracks led straight downhill toward the trees, calm and orderly, walking, not running. Then the snow swallowed them. At the tree line, searchers found the remains of a fire beneath a tall cedar, and beside it, 2 of the young men, frozen where they had fallen. Broken branches on that cedar suggested one of them had climbed high, up to 15 feet, maybe searching for the tent, maybe looking for something else. What could they possibly have been watching for? 3 more bodies lay along the path back toward the tent, as if they'd tried to return and never made it. The first 5 had died of hypothermia, terrible but explainable. The others were not. It took until May to find the last 4, buried in a ravine under deep snow. Their injuries stunned investigators. Crushed ribs, a fractured skull. Damage, one doctor said, comparable to a car crash. Yet the skin was barely marked, and there were details harder still to explain. According to reports, one hiker was missing her tongue and eyes. Some of their clothing, investigators noted, showed traces of radiation. Rumors of strange orange lights in the sky spread through the region. The official Soviet investigation closed with a phrase that only deepened the fog. The cause, it said, was a compelling natural force the hikers could not overcome. And then the case files were quietly sealed. That silence bred theories. Some proponents argue a secret military weapons test went wrong. Others believe it was a Mansi attack, or even something unexplained. Believers point to the radiation and the lights as proof. Skeptics counter that none of it requires the supernatural. In recent years, researchers proposed a quieter answer, a rare slab avalanche. A slow, silent shelf of snow that could crush without burying, driving panicked, injured people into the killing cold. Computer models, some scientists say, fit the injuries remarkably well. It's a compelling explanation, but it doesn't satisfy everyone. Why cut the tent from inside? Why the radiation? Why walk calmly toward the freezing dark? More than 60 years later, 9 names remain carved into a monument in the Urals. And the pass still carries the name of the young man who led them up that mountain and never brought them down. Whatever force drove them from that tent, it left no witness who lived to describe it. The mountain the Mansi called Dead Mountain kept its secret. And on the coldest nights, the wind up there sounds a great deal like an answer we'll never quite hear. So let's go back to the beginning, to the faces behind the names. Because before they were a mystery, they were students. Young, laughing, alive. Igor Dyatlov was 23, a radio engineer with steady hands and a leader's calm. His friends trusted him with their lives up there. That's the part that still stings. They followed a careful man into the mountains, and careful men aren't supposed to vanish. There was Zinata Kolmogorova, warm and stubborn, the kind of person who kept the group's spirits burning. Lyudmila Dubinina, an economics student, always writing in the shared diary, and Semyon Zolotaryov, older than the rest, a war veteran with tattoos and a strange habit of never quite explaining his past. 9 of them set out. 10 had started. And here's a detail people forget. One man turned back. His name was Yuri Yudin. Yudin's joints ached, a flare-up of an old condition. So on the 28th of January, he hugged his friends goodbye and rode back toward the villages. He was the last outsider to see them alive. And for the rest of his life, that goodbye would haunt him. "I would give anything," he reportedly said decades later, "to know what happened to them. Imagine carrying that. The one who lived, the one who limped away and left 9 friends to the mountain." The rest kept climbing. Their own photographs tell the story better than any report. Film later developed from the recovered cameras shows them grinning, throwing snow, building the tent. Ordinary, happy, not a shadow of what was coming. And then there's the last frame, the one that gives investigators chills. A blurred, dark image, a bright smear of light against blackness. Some say it's just a camera being wound as it was packed away. Others whisper it captured the last thing they ever saw. What was it? A flare? A meteor? A trick of a dying shutter? Nobody agrees. But it sits in the case file like an unanswered question, glowing faintly across 60 years. Let's talk about those lights, because they matter. In the weeks around the tragedy, other hikers and locals reported strange glowing orbs drifting over the northern Urals, slow, silent, rising and fading in the dark sky. One group, camped miles away, later swore they'd seen these floating lights on the very night the Dyatlov team died. Could the two be connected? Proponents of the military theory say absolutely. Skeptics say the timing has been stretched and reshaped over decades of retelling. Here's where it gets colder. This region wasn't empty wilderness. Not really. The Soviet military tested weapons here. Rockets. Parachute mines. Devices that detonated in the air with a blinding flash and a shockwave that could throw a body. According to the theory, that would explain the impossible injuries. The crushed ribs, the fractured skull, damage like a car crash, on people with no external wounds. A pressure wave, some believers argue, does exactly that. It ruptures you from the inside. And it might explain the radiation traces found on some of the clothing. Faint, localized, enough to raise eyebrows at the inquest. But mainstream investigators countered that the levels were low, possibly from a camping lantern coated in radioactive material, or from natural sources. Not proof of a secret blast. But if it was just an accident, why the secrecy? Why did authorities allegedly seal parts of the case? Why did some documents stay classified for decades? To believers, silence is confession. To skeptics, it's just the reflex of a paranoid state that classified almost everything. Then there's the detail that people can never quite let go of. The tongue. When Lyudmila Dubinina was found, her tongue and parts of her mouth were reportedly missing. It's the single fact that launched 1,000 darker theories. What could do that? Some imagined violence. Some imagined something monstrous. But forensic experts offer a grim, ordinary answer. She was found in a stream, partly submerged. Soft tissue is the first thing to go in flowing water, and small scavengers do the rest. Nature, not a monster. Still, the local Mansi people had legends, stories of a mountain that did not welcome outsiders. In fact, the peak's name, Kolatsiakol, is often translated as Dead Mountain. Say that out loud and tell me it doesn't crawl up your spine. Investigators at the time actually suspected the Mansi. 9 dead outsiders on a sacred slope? It seemed to point somewhere. But it fell apart fast. There were no other footprints. No signs of attackers. Only 9 sets of tracks, walking down, alone. And those footprints tell their own strange story. They walked. They didn't run. 9 people. some barefoot, some in socks, stepping in an orderly line down into 30 below darkness, away from the only shelter they had. That's the image that won't leave you, isn't it? Not monsters, not aliens, just 9 reasonable people in a moment of pure terror, choosing the freezing night over their tent. What could possibly make you do that? The avalanche theory has an answer: panic. If a slab of snow groaned and shifted above them in the dark, they might have believed the whole mountain was coming down, cut the tent, flee to the tree line, wait it out. A rational choice made in seconds that turned fatal. In 2021, researchers Johann Gahm and Alexander Puzrin published models suggesting a small, delayed slab avalanche was physically possible on that exact slope, at that exact angle. Their simulations even matched the pattern of injuries. It was the most serious scientific answer in decades. But even they admitted it. Their model didn't explain everything. Not the missing eyes, not the radiation, not the calm, deliberate way the group descended. And critics point out something simple. No one, in over 60 years, has ever documented a true avalanche on that gentle slope. So we circle back. Every theory answers some questions and leaves others gaping. Avalanche, military tests, infrasound driving them mad with fear, even the wind, howling over the ridge at a frequency that can trigger dread in the human body. Each one is a key that fits half the lock. And maybe that's the real horror of Dyatlov Pass. Not that we have no answer, but that we have too many, and none of them quite closes the door. In 2019, the Russian government reopened the investigation. Officially, after 60 years. Prosecutors traveled back to the pass, ran their own tests, staged their own reconstructions on that empty slope. Their verdict? An avalanche. The group fled, lost their way in a whiteout, and froze. Case closed. Clean. Final. And yet, almost no one who has studied this story believes it's truly over, because the families never accepted it. The relatives of the 9 have argued for decades that the truth was buried along with their children. Some still push for the full files to be released. Some still believe the state knows more than it has ever said. And Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back, he devoted his life to the case. He identified belongings. He attended reburials. He carried each of his friends home in memory, one by one, until he himself passed away in 2013. His ashes, at his request, were buried near them. So the 10th traveler finally rejoined the 9. The one who left, and the ones who couldn't, reunited on the far side of a mystery that outlived them all. Think about what we actually have. Photographs of laughing friends. A tent slashed from within. 9 bodies scattered across the frozen slope. Injuries no one can fully explain. And a slope named Dead Mountain, keeping its secret in the wind. Was it nature, cruel and ordinary? A slab of snow, a whiteout, the mathematics of cold? Or was it something they were never meant to witness? Something the state spent decades pretending away? Here's what the evidence honestly supports. Extreme cold killed most of them. That much is certain. The rest, the panic, the flight, the trigger that sent them running, remains a shape in the dark that we keep trying to name. And maybe that's why this story refuses to die. It sits right at the edge of the explainable. Close enough to feel solid. Just out of reach when you grab for it. The tent still stood the morning searchers found it, half collapsed, its ropes taut in the wind. The slash marks ran from the inside out. And whatever those 9 saw, or heard, or felt in that last hour, they took it with them into the snow. 9 names, 1 monument, a pass that still carries the name of Igor Dyatlov, the careful young leader who walked his friends up a mountain and never brought them down. Every winter, a few people still make the trek out to that ridge, to stand where the tent stood, to feel the wind that they felt, to ask the mountain the question no report has ever fully answered. And the mountain, as always, says nothing. It just holds its silence, the way it has since the 9th of February, 1959. Patient, cold, certain. So what do you believe? An avalanche of snow? or an avalanche of coincidences too strange to be chance? Whatever the answer, 9 young people went up that slope full of life, and the truth of their last night still walks, barefoot, into the freezing dark. Some mysteries don't want to be solved. This one may simply be waiting for us to stop looking away.